Well, good afternoon. I'm Landon Darrence, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center and Morningstar Chair for Global Energy Security. Very excited to welcome our in-person audience and those joining us around the world virtually to an AC Front Page. The AC Front Page is the Atlantic Council's premier platform for live conversations with world leaders tackling today's greatest challenges. To that end, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to a leader that has been an absolute stalwart of the transatlantic relationship, and as we had an opportunity to discuss earlier, across many administrations. So bipartisan support, opportunities to build partnership for many years. Maroš Šefčovič is Executive Vice President for the European Commission for the European Green Deal and today's featured speaker. We're also joined by Ms. Anna Swanson, Trade and International Economic Reporter of the New York Times, who will be moderating this conversation. Later this week, the Atlantic Council will launch its flagship energy publication, the Global Energy Agenda. It's a moment for us to reflect on what's been accomplished in the year prior in 2023, and an opportunity for setting new ambitions for the year ahead. Moments like today help us inform and drive forward with that outlook. And while geopolitics weighed heavily on the prior year, the European Union, through policies like the European Green Deal, like Repower EU, has demonstrated that you can be a champion for climate ambition while also prioritizing energy security and competitiveness. It's kind of a major balancing act. Whether navigating joint procurement of natural gas supplies or elevating the EU's greenhouse gas emissions benchmarks, Executive Vice President Šefčovič is a central figure in shaping and transforming the future of our energy system. In a year dominated by democratic elections, it's critical that we leverage partnerships like this and forge forward our international relations in a way that strengthens the transatlantic cooperation and helps us achieve our shared energy and climate goals. Executive Vice President Šefčovič, we're very thankful you joined us today. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to our moderator, Anna Swanson, to begin this conversation. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. As Landon mentioned, I'm Anna Swanson. I'm the Trade and International Economics Reporter for the New York Times. Really delighted to be here, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for always very kind remarks. Therefore, I'm coming back all the time, you know.
I do want to mention up top that this event is live and on the record. And for those in the audience watching virtually, you can submit questions using the Ask AC function, or you can submit questions on X, formerly Twitter, using hashtag AC Front Page. For those in the live audience, you'll have the opportunity to raise your hands and ask some questions later on in the program. So let's dive right in. This month, the EU announced climate targets for 2040 that included a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 1990. How does that build on or differ from previous goals? And obviously, the conflict with Russia has forced a re-examination of some energy policies. How is the need to shift away from Russian natural gas influencing European plans?
Well, thank you very much for that question to open our conversation with, because it's, I think, very fundamental for, as it was really correctly said by Landon, to find that sweet spot to do this balancing act. So for us, we have it in our climate law. We should be climate neutral by 2050. So we want to be the first climate neutral continent. I think we share that ambition also with the United States of America, but we kind of enshrined it in the law. So what was very important in this communication was to launch the debate how to get from 2030, where we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emission by 55%, to 100. So what is the trajectory? How can we get there? And we wanted to launch this discussion based on very thorough impact assessment, different scenarios, what do we need from the, let's say, technological development point of view, how to factor in, I would say, this absolutely new situation if it comes to the energy supplies, which was one of the, I would say, most fundamental energy shifts Europe did since probably 70s, that from one year into another, you shift away from Russian gas, from 150 billion cubic meters to a little bit more than 40 right now. And here, I want to really to appreciate it and use it as a, I would say, pattern for the future, that what the good allies should do to each other. I mean, we, of course, as you know very well, we carry really the burden of having two very serious military conflicts close to our borders. And on top of it, on helping the almost 10 million refugees at a certain point of time, on opening our markets, opening our labor market, providing healthcare, providing schooling for the refugees, and also providing 150 billion euros of the financial and military assistance to Ukraine. On top of that, we had to shift away from Russian fossil fuels, and we did it with a great success, thanks to the excellent, outstanding cooperation with the United States of America, and the fact that the LNG sector was able to supply us with 56 billion cubic meters, again, from 1 year into another. And that would be, of course, for us a top priority for the next years, because we want to be climate neutral by 2050. But we know that without gas as a very important transitional fuel, it will not be possible for us. And I think that, speaking of the global responsibility of US, and US became indeed the global guarantor of energy security, the responsibility goes also beyond Europe. I mean, if you want to decarbonize Southeast Asia countries like India, but also Africa, Latin America, so simply there will be a need for this half of the carbon intensity fuel like gas, comparing to coal, and to phase out coal. So the cooperation here is very essential, and for us it was absolutely crucial to get the US LNG in time, despite the fact that we paid a lot for it. But of course, the crucial was to keep the lights on, economics powered on, and really focusing how to deal with the crisis which was generated by Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I understand that some of your recent conversations in Washington have focused around President Biden's recent executive order about natural gas exports. Tell me about those conversations. How do you think that this order, which obviously does pertain to U.S. environmental concerns, could impact the European economy or U.S.-EU relations?
I mean, we had very good conversations on this topic yesterday at the White House, State Department, Department of Energy, and I appreciated that it was very open and constructive discussions. And what was, of course, very important for me was reassurance that if it comes to the next 2-3 years, there should be no impact whatsoever on the supplies of US LNG to Europe. Then I think my interlocutor has been quite clear that despite of this announcement, what is expected in US is that export capacity of the LNG would double between now and 2030. So they should be able to accommodate also the big demand from Europe. And on top of it, there is kind of emergency clause that if things will really go, in the wrong direction, that there is a possibility to kind of adjust the measures which are currently under the discussion. I have also the understanding for the description of the situation as it was presented to me, that when the last type of this, let's call it inventory, was done by the US government, it was in 2019. And it was well before, I would say, this shale or LNG revolution started. So, I mean, to check the pipelines capacity, the tankers traffic, the port ability to transport all that, I think it's important. But at the same time, what I was underscoring, it's also very important how the US government now and also in the future would approach the fact that now indeed you have that responsibility for the global developments in energy security. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of made the statement, something is said in the Washington, D.C. about the gas and LNG, immediately it's kind of transmitted and sent, I would say, it has a ripple effect all over the world. We kind of felt it a little bit for a couple of days now. I think it's stabilized because indeed the contracts are there, supplies are coming. We increased dramatically our regasification capacity to more than 230 BCM per year. So I mean the conditions are there that everything should follow well. But of course we'll be continuing our discussions with the U.S. administration, but also with the LNG sector, and we had very good meeting this morning with all LNG majors of the United States.
Mm-hmm. The shift away from Russian gas has been, such a huge undertaking. I was curious if you could share, maybe an obstacle that you've seen firsthand in that process, and then are there any, opportunities that you've seen in there too?
I think that obstacles been many, of course. The first one was that for decades, and today we can say mistakenly, we believe that through trade and good relations you can democratize the society of Russian Federation. That was, I would say, a belief which was there for a very, very long period. Very often when I was responsible 5 years ago for the project which was called Energy Union, we in Central and Eastern Europe, we remembered extremely well the lessons of 2009 gas crisis, when simply from one day to another the gas supply has been switched, and in our countries, including mine, Slovakia, we just have the energy left for just a couple of days, and we had to completely shut down the industry and channel the remaining parts of energy to hospitals and households. So for me, a priority at that time was that we had to diversify our energy supplies, to have at least 3 different sources, and I was working a lot to get and to build that pipeline from Azerbaijan, from increasing the capacity for LNG, to work with Norwegians, simply to have a more diverse portfolio. But nevertheless, if you look at it, the major flows have been clearly coming from the east to the west. And suddenly you're now in a situation that this big flow, which was like almost at a certain point, almost 40% of gas coming from Russia through Ukraine to Europe, you had to reverse these flows. And the good thing was that we've been investing over the last years a lot into building of interconnectors, LNG terminals, and introducing the reverse flows. But still, it was, at that time, and also I perceived it as an emergency capacity if something goes wrong. And it's completely different thing, like if you now tell the whole industry, okay, this huge quantity which was coming from the east will come from the west, from the north, from the south, and you figured out how to do it. So that, the major problem was infrastructure, to build and complete the regasification fleet. And here I would say the Germany did miracles, I would say, in very short period of time. Pole's been very strategic in building the Baltic connectors straight from Norway. The Azeri gas help as well. The Southern Europe also the Balkan countries building up the regasification capacities. So we've been kind of dealing with that in a lightning speed, I have to say. But then you had the second problem where US came in. When you came to the global markets, everyone was telling you market is tight, meaning there is no gas for you guys. Yeah. So I mean, and then it resulted, of course, in these very high prices, in certain bottlenecks when we've been getting the LNG. But I think here again, the decision of President Biden and that agreement which was found with my boss Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the Commission, to focus on 50 billion cubic meters from the US to Europe was absolutely crucial, and I'm very impressed that it was even exceeded to 56 billion, because it kind of sent that calming effect, and we could then, in a more peace, look for other supplies from other corners of the world just to have the energy we needed. So the infrastructure and the tightness of the market, that was, I would say, the major challenges.
I want to shift to asking a bit about critical minerals. What kind of transatlantic cooperation are you pushing for when it comes to critical minerals? I understand this was, is always and was a topic of the U.S. Trade and Technology Council meetings last month. how do you see, where are those initiatives right now, and how do you see things moving forward?
I think we have quite intense, I would say, diplomatic activity around the critical minerals or critical raw materials, but I think that we are still kind of waiting and working on how to translate the diplomatic activity into the concrete projects, because I'm a projects-driven person, and I think the good thing is that we understand each other, that we cooperate. But I would like to see one or two major projects which we would execute together and show, how can we kind of push for the common solutions, develop the mine, or get the critical raw materials to you and to us, because if it comes to critical raw materials, we in Europe are much more dependent on China than we ever been on Russia if it comes to the fossil fuels. And any future-oriented technologies, electrolyzers, wind turbines, photovoltaic panels, chips, I mean, for all that, you need the critical raw materials, rare earth, magnets, and all these things which we need to kind of get from outside. And simply we are concerned that any dependency could be weaponized. And therefore, we adopted this Critical Raw Material Act, through which we want to explore everything what we have in Europe, what we have in our neighborhood, and work with our friends like United States of America on the projects in the third countries. My ideal solution would be that we would advance or eventually complete our agreements on the critical raw materials, because it would set the framework, and we are discussing it. We are hopefully we will find a solution for that, and I think it would also help from the perspective that EU would finally get the FTA status as Japan did, and it would help us in many other aspects to kind of consolidate our EU-US relations. So yesterday we also discussed the fact that we have very similar philosophy if it comes to critical raw materials. So what I want to say is that when we would be working on some project in a third country, we would like to make sure that it would not just be extraction of the critical raw materials, putting it on the ship, leave with the raw materials, and leave the mess behind. What we want to do is develop the project, create big value added in the country, create new jobs, share the revenues and profits, and make sure that all of us would benefit, because I think that's the approach which we would like to see in a cooperation with the third countries who have the critical raw materials and need the funding, need the expertise to make sure that these critical raw materials would be not only available, but also extracted according to the high sustainability standards.
You mentioned Europe receiving free trade agreement status from the United States. That's been a hurdle to European companies benefiting under the Inflation Reduction Act, of course. Where do those discussions stand right now? And you were just mentioning, a partnership with relation to third countries. I understand that was kind of a major hurdle in those discussions so far.
Yeah, I mean, there have been, yesterday with Mr. John Podesta, we kind of agreed that, of course, a lot of things is going on. And this is a very, difficult time. And I would say that what's happening on a global scale, I fully understand that how overwhelmed we are with the dynamics of day-to-day management and permanent crisis management. But we also agree that let's have another look where our critical minerals agreement was stuck, why it was stuck, and what we can do to kind of intensify this negotiation. So we're going to do that, and we gave ourselves rather, let's say, short term, to looking into it. And at the same time, with Amos Hochstein and Jose Fernandez, we also focused on that. That would be my preference. Let's select 2-3 projects, maybe one per continent: Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and try to put our experts, our financial institutions like EIB, like World Bank, like IMF, our development agencies together, so we can actually learn how to use our experience from these territories, our financial firepower to execute one of these projects, because it would create, I would say, the know-how. It would create, I would say, the teams which would be dealing with these issues, and this would be, I would say, such an important topic for the future economic development, both in the United States and in Europe, that we simply need to learn how to work together and execute this project. Maybe one more thing, I am very hopeful about potential of Ukraine, because I was there many times before the war started. I was, as you probably know, I was working on this EU-Ukraine-Russia negotiations at the time on transit of gas through Ukraine. But we've been also signing together with the Prime Minister Šmihal agreement on cooperation in the field of critical raw materials, so geological surveys, mapping up of the reserves which they have there. And to put it simply, I think Ukraine has everything what we need and what we've been getting from Russia. So I see the potential for critical raw materials, but also potential for low carbon energy in Ukraine as huge, as very, very, very complementary to us. We are already today using the huge underground gas storage to kind of beef up the energy security on the Central and Eastern European front. And that would be, I would say, the one area where, again, I think EU-US can come together as a part of our reconstruction efforts to kind of build this potential Ukraine clearly has.
That's interesting. You were talking about looking into projects in other parts of the world, in Africa, South America, because I think the United States and the EU are clearly very aligned on values when it comes to critical minerals, but they both tend to be, really kind of net consumers, right? Big consumers of these minerals, and will both have a large demand for it. So I was curious, at one point you kind of bring other countries into your conversation, your partnership, and then how you see that dynamic kind of working, vis-a-vis China and China's efforts to move around the world for this industry as well.
I think that you're right from that perspective, that it's not only, let's say, two of us talking to each other, because there is lots of, I would say, movement in this front under the G7, even G20. We set up different so-called clubs for cooperation in the field of mineral extractions. And so therefore I would say that the understanding, the intent, and this diplomatic work is to a great extent done. Now what we need are the, let's say, most promising projects and go through this planning and hopefully execution phase. So we would see how this, let's say, diplomatic understanding is translated into the concrete projects execution. So that's, I think, what should be the next phase. And I think if it comes to China, indeed, that's a huge challenge. I think 80% of the global critical raw materials extraction and processing is with China right now. I think we in Europe, we have only 1% of critical raw materials for our economy from Europe. So clearly we need to diversify, and how to do it. I think we have to be much more agile, and we have to offer the better alternative. And the alternative is that if you are with us, I mean, we are ready to create high value added. We are ready to share, and we are ready to make sure that community where these projects are and a country where these projects are would clearly benefit. And we in Europe are the biggest development aid providers. We are biggest climate finance provider. I mean, just to put this two figures on the table, in climate finance, we put together public and private financial transfer in the realm of more than 40 billion euros, and more or less the same figure goes for development aid. So I believe that we have financial firepower to kind of support these projects and to do it with this philosophy of sharing, not just extracting and taking it away and not even creating the local jobs and leaving with material and lots of debt for the local government. So, I mean, we started the project which is called Global Gateway. We had a huge turnout in Brussels. I think it was two months ago, and I have to say that it resonated well with the countries whom we invited. But I would say that it's success when I will see the first project is being executed and that we are actually delivering on this political intention with the practical, concrete projects.
Mm-hmm. I know there had been a lot of, sort of heartburn and upset in the EU with regard to the Inflation Reduction Act last year. What is the status of that now? I mean, are you still, worried about the Inflation Reduction Act luring certain industries away? And have internal discussions in the EU, has there been kind of a resolution about how much to subsidize green industry in response to the Inflation Reduction Act?
I think, of course, our systems are different, and I have to say that the Inflation Reduction Act came to us as a surprise. I understand that it was kind of a surprising conclusion also for quite many people in US, but the fact is that because of Inflation Reduction Act, some of the projects and several of them been projects upon which I was working, like building up the battery ecosystems in Europe, building of the gigafactories. All these projects being slowed down or postponed or transferred to US. And for us, it came in this difficult moment, which I was referring to, the energy crisis and coping with all the, I would say, consequences of the war in Ukraine. Of course, we are discussing this with our American friends. Therefore, I think that if we can find a way through this mineral agreement to kind of look into what we can do better together and also use this cooperation for the FTA status for the EU, I think that would be very welcome development. And the next stage, which is, let's say, my proposition I'm pitching for in all the meetings I have in the US, is that we should kind of move on to the next level of cooperation, and I call it creation of the transatlantic green tech market. So I know that it's not the free trade agreement, but I think that we would benefit hugely if we would create, I would say, this marketplace from the perspective of common standards, from the perspective that we would inform each other about, the sort of subsidies policies, or as we call it in Europe, state aid, if we kind of would push for building bridges across the Atlantic in the form of joint venture, mutual investment, so we can use the economies of scale for these new technologies in a way that would be beneficial not only for US and EU, but also for the third countries. Because if we want to be serious about really dealing with the climate change, and I think that fact that we are now over the 1.5 degrees Celsius is kind of telling that the time is pressing. So Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, all of them would need this clean and green technologies. And sooner we develop them at scale, so they are affordable, better it would be for the planet. So I see this transatlantic marketplace as a recipe for making our cooperation even closer, stronger, but with a very positive impact it might have on, I would say, sharing this clean technology with the rest of the world and helping us to also tackle overheating of our planet.
One area I had been following with interest was the green steel negotiations, what the U.S. calls the Global Arrangement on Sustainable Steel and Aluminum. I was curious, what happened with that negotiation? Do you think that the United States has kind of an adequate methodology to measure carbon emissions? Was that an issue? And then just kind of more generally, do you think the United States is ready for the European carbon border adjustment mechanism to come into force, or could that be a new source of trade friction in the future?
I think we have I would say, two different approaches and philosophies which kind of stem from our tradition. So we because we are 27 different member states. So for us to work together and for our single market to perform, we of course have to work a lot with the legal frameworks, with the regulation, with the uniform application of the law. So there is a guarantee that when you produce something in Slovakia, it would be produced according to the same standards as in Denmark or Italy, and nobody needs to check it anymore because we are kind of following the same rules. So that's I would say the tradition upon which we built the European Union. So we use the same approach to the Green Deal. We kind of look at it comprehensively from all sectors, from energy through industry down to the agriculture. And I think that when I talk to my American friends, nobody questions that we have probably the most advanced and most sophisticated legal framework for the Green Deal. But the issue is that the parameters of the Green Deal has changed so much because of these two crises, COVID, war in Ukraine, these energy spikes, high inflation, that we need to work much harder on how to translate this legal framework into reality by creating business case for the Green Deal in Europe, because you cannot fund everything with public money. And you need this entrepreneurial energy and entrepreneurial, I would say, this entrepreneurship to bring this, I would say, new project into fruition. In US, I mean, the approach is different. Here we have the same goal to be climate neutral, to tackle the climate change, but in US you drive more, I would say, the projects which generate the revenue and whatever the technology who can do it, so they do it because it's good for business and of course if it's good for environment is a plus. And we just discussed yesterday that now we need more of this can-do attitude and business case from US, but probably in the frame of 5 to 10 years. Also, US would need some kind of regulatory framework, how to push I would say, tackling the climate change to the next stage. So we had, I would say, the different cycles, but this is, where we are, and I think we can just only learn from each other. And therefore, I think again coming back to this green marketplace would be good bridge over the Atlantic and over these two different approaches to the policy, because we share the same goal. And on CBAM, we see it clearly as an environmental measure. It's a mechanism which should prevent the carbon leakage from Europe. More or less, what I want to say is that we are looking for the ways how to reward those companies which have low carbon footprint, which have sustainable production, which treat their employees decently, and we want to avoid the eventual punishment that because of the public procurement, now we go for the cheapest alternative somewhere from faraway Asian countries, because we want that the Green Deal would be, of course, linked with our growth strategy, with creating new jobs, and of course with bringing economic advantage as well. And I think that if I look at also the figures, what would be the effect on U.S. exports, I think it's like 0.5%, something like that. But of course, we are working on it. We are discussing. But for me, I know that we are running out of the time. But this last point, for me, the best solution for creating a level playing field on the global scale would be to have the global carbon price. I know that it's not going to happen tomorrow, so we are working very closely also with Canadians or linking up the carbon pricing mechanism, because I think that would help us a lot to kind of have a level playing field, that carbon has a price, and if the price is the same everywhere, then lots of problems of this kind would be avoided.
Great. It's time to open it up for Q&A. I do have some questions submitted online. If you'd like to submit a question in the audience, I believe someone can bring over an iPad to you, or perhaps you can ask that in the room. So let me start with one of the online questions. Someone asks, how can Europe ensure the Green New Deal does not exacerbate or confirm fears regarding deindustrialization in the EU? What can the EU do to tame electricity prices? Is there a structural fix?
I think, I mean, it's very clear. I can tell you that I am, as it was kindly highlighted by Landon, on the EU affairs for probably now more than 2 decades, but I never seen such emphasis put by the European leaders. I'm talking about presidents and prime ministers and of course the institutional leaders on the competitiveness as right now, because I think that the 2 crises, war in Ukraine, high energy prices, and that fear of eventual deindustrialization kind of focused the minds of the leaders that this is under no circumstances going to happen in Europe. And therefore now you see the flurries of activities focus on the competitiveness. I mean, we are working on energy prices, and I will tell in a second how. We are having very intense interaction with the business leaders. We are also talking, of course, to our agriculture sector, which is very, very restless these days because they simply lost a lot of income over the last 2-3 days, and we are really working very closely with all the sectors of the industry which are the most affected by the green transition, how to help them to build on the advantages and pluses we have in Europe and not to suffer from, let's say, unfair competition from outside. So for us, clearly we want Europe to be green and clean, but industrial, and revenue from the industry is absolutely crucial for sustaining our European social model, which is, I mean, something what our citizens would not even think that, I mean, could be changed. So it's absolute political priority. And if it comes to energy prices, that's of course the big challenge, and for us it's a big priority. So we changed the so-called electricity market design. What it means in colloquial language is that we changed the way how we can trade electricity in Europe, where we are going back to the possibility of long-term contracts, so-called power purchase agreements, where we are looking for the way how we can allow the companies to invest in the long term. And we are using also governmental power to kind of limit the worries of the eventual fluctuation or eventual loss if you invest in the right technology. So over the time, I believe we would lower the energy prices. What would help us, of course, would be if we would have even more LNG on the market, because it hopefully would help us to lower the price, because despite the fact that we generated more electricity from renewables than from fossil fuels last year, still in our gas, in our energy system, the gas is so-called what we call the last marginal fuel. So it means that, and it's a little bit technical, that you have to calculate the overall energy price based on what is the cost of this marginal fuel. So let's say if you don't have enough sun and enough water, you still need that base load, and that base load is coming mostly by gas, and therefore you have to pay the gas price if they're producing or idling, because they're just there on a standby, and that will be there for a long time. So for us to have a competitive price of gas would help us to lower the prices in Europe for electricity.
Okay. If there are any questions in the room, there's a microphone stand here.
Hi, good afternoon. Sophie Hammer, I'm the climate counselor here at the German Embassy in DC. And thank you very much for all your remarks and your very interesting input. I was wondering, what role do you see for the Climate Club when it comes to a transatlantic green marketplace and in setting common standards?
I think that, thank you very much for that question. But of course, it's also very important because from the perspective of the generational challenge, clearly tackling the climate challenge is the most difficult one. Very often, and I know that this is difficult for every politicians, because you have to deal with with the crisis management. Unfortunately, we have too many crises, I would say, these days. But I mean, from the perspective of the scale of the task, from the perspective of the importance of the task, and I would say how we would hand over the planet to the next generation, clearly tackling the climate change and have a clear roadmap how we are going to make it possible for our children and their children. I mean, in this century, it's absolutely crucial. And I think we've been working very well with Secretary Kerry in Dubai. I think that EU-US cooperation was absolutely crucial to, at a certain moment, I would even use the word unblock the negotiations on the final document. It will be very crucial this year for climate finance COP in Azerbaijan, and of course absolutely topical when the Brazil will take over in the next year. So I think that work on in the form of climate club, I think, would be very important for the future, because it helps you to kind of adjust the approaches, to exchange the best practices and look for the common solutions.
Great. Another here.
First off, thank you so very much for your time today, Your Excellency. My name is Alex. I'm from Georgetown University. And recently I had a discussion with His Excellency Enrico Letta. And we were talking about that one of the key issues about the Green Deal right now is how to finance it. And especially looking at the farmer protests right now. One of the questions is how to integrate other mechanisms of the EU to try and finance the green transition, especially the common agricultural policy. Because right now it seems like the Green Deal is relying a lot on Next-Gen EU, which is set to end soon and probably won't continue afterwards. So how do you see this possibility of integrating the common agricultural policy and the budget that's allocated to that to try and integrate it with the Green Deal? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start with the last part of your question, because of course agriculture is very much on the mind of every single politician in Europe. And if you look at I would say the situation of our farmers and foresters, you have seen that over the last couple of years, especially if it comes to farmers, their incomes dropped in some cases significantly. One of the examples, just for you to see the scale, is that, I mean, from one year to another, let's say the revenue they had from cereal production and sale dropped from 80 billion euros to 60 billion euros. So, I mean, suddenly you have kind of loss of 20 billion euros, which is a lot of money for the farming community. Then, of course, they suffer a lot because of the high gas prices, energy prices, because they use fertilizers, they use tractors, and simply, I mean, the econometrics of the agricultural production like significantly change over the last couple of years. And therefore, from one side, when you talk to them, they have lots of understanding and I would say the support, the measures which we proposed under the Green Deal, because they know that that we need to treat the soil in a respectful way, that they need the biodiversity for pollinators, that we have a big problem with the droughts in the parts of Europe. And I was talking to, Spanish regional leaders from Andalusia, from Catalonia. I mean, the reservoirs already now, I mean, you have, at least in Brussels, we have an impression it's raining all the time, which is, but there, I mean, you have the water reservoirs filled like up between 4 to 20%, and we are in the middle of what we would call in Europe the rainy season. So they understand all that, but of course, they are telling us that, look, our incomes dropped. So if you want to kind of work with us on all these measures, we have to look at new sources of revenues for agriculture. Of course, one of the idea which we are testing, and we'll see how it will be in the future. I again believe that we can use much more the concept of carbon removal certificates. So if you are the responsible forester, and if your forest serves as an important carbon sink, or if you're going to do what they're going to do in Andalusia, as I heard from the First Minister of Andalusia, that they're going to reforest part of the field just to keep the water in the system. I think you should be rewarded for that. I think, I mean, because you are removing the carbon from the environment. So I think you should be rewarded for that. Like you have to buy your emission allowance when you're going to pollute. So I think you should be rewarded when you're actually removing the carbon from the system. But for that you need to discuss the methodology. That's a little the same like with the green steel and with other things. But I think that's I would say one concept with which we have to work. And concerning the financial instruments, you are right that we are kind of funding the Green Deal projects from basically, I would say, two major sources. One is this 7 years budget, what we call in EU speak multi-annual financial perspective. And there it's in a realm of 1.2 trillion euros, and like 40% of that is devoted to, I would say, climate-related projects. And then the next generation EU, which is in the realm of 800 billion euros. So again, I would say that more than 40% was devoted to this type of the project. But of course, the scale of demand and change is much bigger than what you could fund from the I would say public funds or through grants. So we are talking very intensively with the new management of the European Investment Bank, with the financial industry, because we need to work more with leveraging, with blended finance, and especially to bring also private investors, private equity in investing into this transition, because it makes sense. We have to build, coming back to what I said earlier, business case for this Green Deal project, and we are now figuring out with the captains of the European industry how to achieve that.
Great. Well, we're all out of time for today, but thank you so much for a great discussion. Thank you to everyone who joined us both online and in the room today. And as a reminder, this event will be available both on YouTube and the Atlantic Council's website. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.